Well, here it is, Evitel. Shadowlands, at last!
Oh wow, you got an alpha invite too?
Oh, yeah, are you surprised?
A little, yeah.
I feel like I should be offended, but it's all just so exciting! Look at all this cool new stuff!
Yeah, you've got to be careful in alpha though, Tally. There are loads of weird bugs around that can cause you trouble, and I know how easily you get upset.
Don't be silly, Evitel. What bug could possibly spoil all of this? It's just such a joy to be here! Oh my god! Look at the super cute little owl thing! Hello, little buddy. I've got a feeling that we're gonna be best of friends. Oh, okay. Well, that must be one of those bugs you were talking about. And see, I was fine.
Well, I guess we'd better do some questing. I wonder where we should start.
Oh, look, there's another player over there. Let's ask them. Excuse me, Mr. High Mountain Touring Guy.
Greetings, fellow Alpha players. How can I be of service?
Holy shit.
In the name of all that's sacred and pure. I'm not really sure alpha's for me after all.
Yeah, me neither. I might skip testing this time.
Actually, I might also skip the whole of Shadowlands.
Me too. Also, I'm vegetarian now.
Me too.
Why does that keep happening?
Knowledge is power.
Aloha Internet, Taliesin here, and welcome to another episode of the Weekly Reset, Taliesin and Evitel's Wondrous Wisdomshow, and what a special episode it is, because as you well know, the first playable Shadowlands Alpha is now here, and with it, a smorgasbord, no, a cornucopia of new and exciting things, guaranteed to grab your interest no matter what your new expansion persuasion. Hey, you want to take a stroll around some new zones, questing and seeing what you can see in actual heaven though? Shadowlands Alpha got you covered, fam. You want a fresh, surprisingly good starting experience for new and returning players alike? Say no more! You want a grand sweep of new class changes? Take a ticket and wait in line, because we'll be getting there very shortly. You want a dungeon journal full of, like, really quite important names that we will be fighting as bosses pretty much as soon as the expansion kicks off? Well, fret not, little friendo, because that's really not going to be a problem in the slightest. A huge tear in the sky over Ice Crown? Yeah, why not? And that's just the stuff that is here and physically playable now to any old pleb. There's also the usual whole heap of data mining that has been going on around this build as the geniuses at Wowhead continue to dig into the secrets and delights and sometimes abominations that we will also be taking a good old very well telegraphed spoilery look at, including initial looks at transmog, NPC and main character models, character customizations, Covenant abilities, Torghast upgrades and broadcast text, none of which should be taken seriously at all, but all of which is super fun to look at. And if that's not enough, then there's also the constant blue posts that Blizzard have been putting out, and the interviews that big cheeses like Ian Hazakostas and Steve Danusa have been giving too, which also have some pretty awesome stuff for us to get our teeth into. Basically, this week has been one glorious, massive cluster shit of awesome newness just ejaculated all over a wall, which is obviously great, but also overwhelming and incredibly awkward to sift your way through. And so this episode is dedicated to trying to organise all of this week's info and events into one easily consumable package for you, our dear viewer, that we care about so much. What I'm saying is, you don't have to sift through the Shadowlands wall of ejaculate. We're going to do that for you. We're sifting through the ejaculate for you. Good. And a little reminder at this point of our trusty spoiler bot system to make sure that you don't see anything that you don't want to see, with our new icons designed by art competition winner Clow. The bot wears a tie because, you know, Weekly Reset. Blue bot for stuff which is harmless or pretty common knowledge. So that would include zone or dungeon previews, some dungeon journal entries this episode, that kind of thing. Red bot for stuff with genuine story spoiler implications, which more often than not comes from data mining and includes things like certain new models that might give too much away, or in particular, data mined broadcast text. We'll always announce a spoiler bot in advance, and it will appear in the top right-hand corner here above my head, so that you can skip through the video until it disappears without being forced to look at all the spoilery stuff on the other side of the screen. And with that all cleared up, let us begin on what was a monumental week for the new expansion, which started on Monday with the announcement of the upcoming alpha, you're welcome by the way, and a couple of big blue posts from Blizzard regarding Covenant abilities and class changes, which sparked quite the heated debate in the community before a single pixely foot had even been set in Bastion. The Covenant abilities in particular are the controversial topic. We have an even better idea of how they're going to play out now since Wowhead data mined initial numbers tuning and Soulbinds, which will be used to increase and adapt player power even more, and it's the kind of subject that really deserves a whole video on its own, which is exactly what we're going to be doing next week. But suffice to say that after this blue post and after seeing the Covenant abilities and the numbers involved with them, the worries regarding the system are exactly the same as they have been since it was first announced back at BlizzCon. Players being concerned that they may be forced to pledge their allegiance to a Covenant that isn't Revendreth just because that non-Revendreth Covenant might have the best Covenant ability for their class. Or even worse, in my opinion, that they get forced into only ever being able to be properly optimized for one spec or style of play because of that Covenant ability. So for example, maybe they choose a Covenant with a really good single target ability because they like to raid, but then they always feel like they've locked themselves out of being able to do Mythic Plus or PvP at a high level. Or maybe their Covenant is just generally really good for DPS, which is awesome, but which means they feel sad whenever they want to play their healer spec. Genuine and legitimate concerns that we've talked about a lot on stream and which we think we have some genuinely good feedback and solutions for, which we will discuss in that next video. Because, you know, best case scenario, Covenants are cool, and it would be great if they could be made to work without throwing all or some of the idea out. And it certainly looks like we're going to have a fair old time to try and get it right. At the time of writing, we still don't have a release date for Shadowlands, and with most of Team 2 working from home right now for pretty understandable reasons, I don't think anyone's going to be too surprised or upset if the new expansion gets pushed back to 2021. Covenants are the main progression feature in the game, after all, both from a player power and story point of view, and you get the feeling that they will be much of what the technical feedback of Shadowlands will centre around until we're live. Basically, we're going to be talking about them a lot in the coming months. And of course, pretty much no Covenant stuff, and definitely no Soulbind stuff, is available to play in the alpha now. And luckily, this playable alpha was hot on the heels of those blue posts, so we could all stop speculating and just get in there and see the stuff for ourselves, with much of Bastion, the Necrotic Wake dungeon, and the new 1 to 10 starting experience, Exile's Reach, all available, as well as those juicy class changes. And like most players lucky enough to be included in that initial round of invites, our alpha journey started in Bastion, which is, you know, actual heaven in Shadowlands terms. And very light blue bot warnings here, but Bastion is the first zone that you visit in the story of Shadowlands, as you try and warn them about the dastardly plans of the jailer in the moor that you experienced in the intro scenario before making your base in Oribos, the central hub. Indeed, you are the first soul that has been to Bastion in quite a while, because of the jailer stealing all the souls for the moor, and the Heavenly Paradise is starting to feel the strain of being starved of their power source. The zone looks absolutely stunning, much better than it did in the BlizzCon demo. The storyline you become caught up in is fun and has some lovely characters, the obvious favourites being the tag team of Cly and Pelagos, who are just, well, they're super cute, I love them. And speaking of super cute things that I love, obviously there's also the beautiful, perfect Swolkins everywhere, and at all times. Sometimes carrying boxes, sometimes cleaning floors, sometimes hammering stuff, sometimes watching each other hammer stuff, sometimes, I don't know, fixing a bell or whatever, sometimes getting swole, but always being awesome. And you know what? I don't want to choose Bastion as my actual Covenant, obviously, because seriously, I'm not a total dweeb, and also Revendreth exists. But what I'm saying is that if I had to choose it, then I could pretty much cope as long as I was surrounded by round awesome Swolkin the whole time. I love them so much that I've managed to completely delete any guilt from my brain that they are quite obviously slaves, being forced to do slave stuff by their evil blue masters. I've managed to hardly think of the whole obvious slave thing, like hardly even at all. It's great. Of course, as you play through the zone, the new 3D in-game marker system is noticeable for the first time too, which I think I'm gonna really like. It doesn't work perfectly all the time yet, but when it does, it's a really neat little feature which allows you to look at the world around you on screen rather than constantly checking the minimap, and that's gotta be a good thing. I approve. But the most interesting thing about Bastion for me though is how little of it appears you may have to do before you move on. We interviewed lead narrative designer Steve Danusa on stream this week, and he said some pretty interesting things, like how that sword in Silithus will be important at some point in this expansion, and letting slip about the existence of a Titan homeworld, among other things. But he also talked about their approach to story in Shadowlands leveling, because on the face of it, in this new expansion, we will follow a much more linear path than Legion and BFA's choose whichever zones you like in whichever order approach. So we have to start in Bastion, for example. But Steve says that, yes, while that's true, the team are trying to almost have their cake and eat it. So there is a linearity to the story, but also greater freedom. And I think I know what he means. There's a point in the Bastion questing, about 20 to 30 minutes in, where you complete your initial challenge and get rewarded with your class-specific Covenant ability, on loan until you commit to a Covenant for reals at max level. The characters are all like, hey, nice one, well, I guess you've delivered your message now and will want to be on your way, although just so you know, there is still tons of shit to sort out here, like if you want to, but it's up to you, no big deal, lol. If you want to help out, come find me, lol. And if then you do go and find them, they're all like, oh cool, you decided to stay, and just as well, because shit is getting real, and then the proper zone storyline starts. That point, after you get your Covenant ability, to me, seems like the moment where, if you want, you could be done with Bastion. Choose to head back to Oribos, tell the Arbiter that you delivered your message, and have her send you to Maldraxxus or whatever the next zone is. And here's the thing, that point occurs with this much of the map revealed. Basically what I'm saying is, it seems like you will not have to stick around too much in any zone that you don't want to. I mean sure, if you nope out of all 4 zones that quickly, then you're not going to actually hit max level, but what it means is that you can go to each zone, play through just the opening quests, and then decide which ones you want to go back and go deep into the story of. And that sounds pretty cool to me. Usually when leveling, I finish the lore master of every zone before moving on. In Shadowlands, I'm already thinking that my first playthrough might see me go on a whistle-stop tour of the zones before then deciding where to spend the majority of my time. And that sounds like it would be a pretty fresh and enjoyable way of doing things. Of course, there's also the dungeon, the Necrotic Wake, available in alpha right now, which seems to mark the climax of the overall Bastion storyline. And yeah, more spoilers here, but it turns out that the Necrolords of Maldraxxus have had it with the Anima drought and are attacking our blue buddies to steal all of theirs, which normally I wouldn't care about because, you know, Bastion, meh. But when you attack my beautiful Swolkins, you attack me, okay, Edgelord? I mean Necrolords. And we've played through the dungeon a few times, and it's fine. The first half is very trash heavy, and the first 2 bosses are essentially ads fights, so there is definitely a sense of cutting your way through an invading army. So I get the feeling that fresh template level 50 characters are a bit undergeared, and those ads were not mucking around, and also needed CC and kiting, which is something that the modern DPS player is not always totally great at. So yeah, it was a bit of a frustrating slog, but the second half of the dungeon, where you fly up to the Maldraxxus Necropolis and take the fight to them, was a lot more instantly enjoyable. A big hook-flinging abomination where targeted players have to aim the hook to instead bring down the main mad scientist dude so he can be DPS'd is buggy and horrible and made me want to cry, but it's a neat enough idea. And the final boss, where players get individually transported to a gauntlet, is another imaginative mechanic, even if in practice this final encounter was by far the easiest fight in the dungeon. I've often said that I'd like to see Blizzard focus on more interesting and important boss fights in dungeons, because I think it makes for much more interesting Mythic Plus, so I mostly like what's on offer here. And I think we can lift the blue spoiler bot there for the time being as we talk about those class changes, which is the other reason to be running your level 50 character through Shadowlands questing and dungeons. How is the Great Unprune working out? How are the classes looking? Ian Hazzikostas said in his interview with Sloot this week, well, that there would be no war or titan forging in Shadowlands, although at the moment there is, just saying. But also that whereas while all of this class stuff will be iterated on and tuned and changed to some degree before launch, they're not planning another big drop or rework. So actually, we're not in a terrible place to judge this stuff right now. And obviously, this is another topic for a whole series of videos over the next year probably, but the TLDR is this. Most classes play pretty much to the same principle and core abilities, but usually with just a bit more. So my favourite spec, Discipline Priest, still does DPS to heal by atonement in exactly the same way that it has for the last couple of expansions. Whew. But now I get Mind Blast and, importantly, a lovely AoE Mind Shear to work into my rotation as well, which is very nice indeed. Fury Warrior is, again, very similar to BFA, but now it's got a whole load of added damage mitigation with Ignore Pain and Shield Block if, you find yourself using a shield at any point during your Fury gameplay, Other classes have seen bigger changes like Enhancement Shaman, which again does follow the basic same rotation as BFA, even though Maelstrom is now completely removed. But with so many added totems and options from talents available, there is potential for some really very strikingly different builds, which is awesome. I've heard the term Battle Mage unironically and genuinely thrown around with regards to enhancement, which might be going a bit over the top, especially as its enhancement, Blizz are contractually obligated to make it shit again in time for launch, but it's nice to see Shaman players happy right now, if just temporarily. So if I had to sum up the feel of the class changes so far, I'd say in most cases it's same idea, more options. And finally, for the playable side of the alpha this week, we also had fun playing through the fresh level 1 to 10 starting experience, Exile's Reach, which new players will have to play through the very first time they enter Azeroth, and which the rest of us can choose to. And yeah, that might make you think, oh, whatever, Taliesin, give a shit, I've got like 100 characters, who cares? And that's actually totally fair enough. I kind of feel the same, but it deserves to be pointed out that Exile's Reach is genuinely really good. Only the Alliance version is testable at the moment, although I'm pretty certain that the Horde instance will be exactly the same, just with appropriately more spiky characters. And it's genuinely a really enjoyable and tightly designed romp, especially so if you put yourself into the shoes of someone that has never played the game before. At the very start, it guides you through the basics of gameplay, including rotation, looting, leveling up, exploration, vendoring, and finally, instanced group play, all tied up in a really direct and cohesive story with pretty fun characters. And if I'm being honest, and I say this as someone who loves Northshire Abbey, mind you, it's a lot more fun than Northshire Abbey. Even better, there's one class-specific quest in your journey too. So when I did it on a Warlock, I had to find the body of a shittier Warlock than me who had died trying to summon a Voidwalker, then read his book and do the ritual myself, and that's how I learned my Summon Voidwalker spell. On Warrior, I had to execute a ghost who wanted to finally find peace on a picturesque bridge, and that's how I learned Execute. As a Druid, I went on a little trek with my new Druid buddy who I just rescued from a spider nest to perform a ritual and unlock travel form. It's just a little thing, but it's really cool and I like it very much. And of course the entire thing is wrapped up in gorgeous up-to-the-minute WoW graphics that do such a good job of showing new players, look, this game is old, but it can look lovely though, just like a real game though. That it jars even harder at the end of the island when you catch a flight to Stormwind, which now looks like a Minecraft town in comparison, but okay, you can't win them all, I guess. It's great, it's good for the game, it gets a total thumbs up from me. Thumbs up.
Oh, hi there. My name's Evitel, and I'm here to put up a big, massive red bot spoiler warning as we get ready to go through the data mining. And fam, you might want to put on a bib for this stuff because it's juicy. You should never dive straight into a red bot without a solid warm-up session though, so let's talk character customizations. One of the big features of Shadowlands is the supposed massive increase in character customization options, pretty much none of which are playable in the alpha right now, but many of which have been dragged out of the data by Wowhead. And yeah, you'd better believe there's a whole ton of links down in that description. Now of course, anything that is in the data but not actually playable is not to be taken totally seriously, especially not these options, I suspect, which aren't even rigged properly in most cases. But screw it! Check out my cool new tattooed Night Elf boys, whose tattoos look weirdly like they're not really tattoos but body hair shaved into fun shapes. It's weirdly unsettling, but also great. Count me in. Check out my smexy, silky, smooth Forsaken crew with their totally not bony bods and emo misfits haircuts. Check out my dwarves with their new skin tones and also many tattoos. Okay, we can actually save ourselves a lot of time here by pointing out that at the moment, the vast majority of these customizations are limited to eye color, skin tone, and tattoos. Like, everyone has tattoos now. It's like WoW is exclusively populated by Premier League footballers, and that's fine, sure, but tats are like one of the less interesting options in my opinion. Where are my different human faces, guys? Much of the discussion has been based around blood elves though, partly because of their darker skin tones, which some people have objected to on the grounds that it goes against lore that explicitly states that all blood elves are fair-skinned. I kind of feel like, who cares if it goes against the established lore when it comes to skin tones anyway? But as it happens, it doesn't. Chronicle describes the Highborn's transformation into High Elves as, after being exiled from the Well of Eternity, the Highborn began to feel the effects of aging and disease. Their skin had lost its violet hue, and they had begun to shrink in stature. So not specifically or universally paler, just not purple. So maybe shut up about that, I don't know. There's also the appearance in the data of blue eyes for blood elves, which many are calling the high elf option, which means that high elves are finally playable in game, just like everyone always wanted. And everyone is totally happy about that, especially on the forums, where the discovery was greeted with universal praise and genuine outpourings of joy as players learned that at last they would be able to take control of the blue-eyed high elves they had always dreamed of. That finally Blizz had listened and given them the one thing they had wanted more than anything else, and no! It was a shit show, obviously.
Fish this! I might just unsub. Sick of getting spat in the face by Blizzard as an Alliance player. Blizzard already spat in our face. This, if true, is a dagger to the heart. And the Alliance are no more. Everyone's gonna be Horde now. Rip Gold Shirin.
And honestly, those reactions are understandable, because famously, when players ask for High Elves, they're specifically asking for Alliance High Elves, as can be found in their own group in the Siege of Suormar, separate from the Blood Elves and Night Elves, and recognized in-game by the characters as a different thing. Players who want High Elves want to stand in that group, whereas a blue-eyed Blood Elf would stand in this group, so it's not the same thing. That said, it may be a little bit too soon to get overly upset. Don't forget, none of the customization options we've shown you here are actually in the alpha. They've been put together by some frankly Herculean mesh rigging efforts by Steven at Wowhead, because alpha is weird, which is why sometimes you get strings pop up that suggest skeletons, Vrykul, and Tuskar have been tagged as allied races. Please don't tell Tally. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the blue eyes we are seeing turn out to be just NPC options, or Death Knight eyes, or some other non-player customization. I guess I'll worry about it when it's already in there, especially when there's a whole ton of new armor set and weapons to worry about instead, like the incomplete look at some Covenant sets. And look, I was always a Bastion or Ardenweald girl before, but I have to admit, some of these Maldraxxus and Venthyr models are starting to turn me. The Maldraxxus armor sets being a whole heap of edgy 90s metal album cover level ridiculousness. I mean, seriously. Look at that leather set! That's dumb. In the same way Duke Nukem is dumb, which means it's generally pretty awesome. And look at the Venthyr weapons! Look at the double-handed swords and fencing rapiers! Compare it to Bastion's chubby little Titany swords that seem to be made with half the amount of polygons and look like Play-Doh. Although, I get it, Bastion is heavily Grecian influenced and Plato is Greek, so I may be having second thoughts, especially as being a male wearer, I'm guaranteed to get totally dicked no matter what Covenant I choose. Well, okay, maybe Bastion will do better in the mount department. Huh. Never mind. What about Ardenweald? Okay, now you're talking. Yes, this will do nicely. Thank you, beautiful stag. You'd be perfect if only you could fly. How am I gonna fly in Ardenweald? Well, atop a stupid, gorgeous moth, of course. Okay, I'm back on board with Ardenweald, especially since they get the cool backpack thing as a cloak mog too. Unless, that is, Maldraxxus has some stupid 80s horror movie outrageously proportioned shameless edge boys to ride, that is. Oh, they do. What a surprise. And you know what? I'm not too fussed about the Revendreth mounts. They're cool and all, they just look a bit, hey you guys, you know? Come back to me when the model which is currently listed as carriage mount gets data mined, and then we'll talk Revendreth. Actually, don't come to me talking about armor sets either until the Maw raid sets are available. This is the shit I want. Which just leaves that big juicy red spoiler bot warning as we take a look at some character models. You've almost certainly seen the new Sylvanas model by now, in her own Maw armor, which would seem to be making her allegiances pretty clear. And then there's the jailer himself, or at least a jailer, found in the Maw. This model is about 6 stories high, and I get the feeling it might be more of a background piece of set dressing than an actual model that you interact with, a huge presence lumbering around in the background sort of thing. I don't think it's the jailer either way, but he looks brilliant with his scratched rune prison tattoo things. We have Bolvar looking just like in the cinematic, of course, but we'll be seeing loads of him throughout the expansion. There's plenty of time for Bolvar. And of course, Kael'thas, an awesome model until you realize this other Kael'thas model exists, and frankly, once you do, why would you ever need any other Kael'thas model? He's wearing black nail varnish. And you might point out that it's dirt or rot, but I would point out that if you really think a boy who dresses like this would let his nails be black through dirt and not nail polish, then I'm sorry, but we clearly moved in very different scenes in our youth. It's nail polish. Kael'thas is obviously a Venthyr, but the other Covenants have their fair share of familiar faces too, like bony-tailed skeleton naga Lady Vash in Maldraxxus, of course, and Uther, the heavenly paladin in Bastion. For me, some of the most exciting models are related to the Other Side dungeon, also known as the Bwonsamdi dungeon. And look, I did put the red bot up, okay? But it turns out that all those who speculated that Bwonner's mysterious boss might be one Mue'zala look like they're going to be totally wrong, as datamined broadcast text suggests the Sand Fury Loa of Death appears to be his rival. A rival who did whisper to Vol'jin and trick him into making Sylvanas Warchief, and who we kill at the end of the Other Side dungeon because, hi, here's the model for Mue'zala. He's another big chunky boy, and I approve. Other bosses in that dungeon, by the way, are Hakar the Soul Flayer and both Millhouse and Maleficent Manastorn. It was already the dungeon we were most excited for, now we can't wait. And it raises the question, who is Bwonsamdi's boss? That same datamined broadcast text hints that it might be the Winter Queen from Ardenweald, and since her domain is where all the Loa pass through on their way to being regenerated, it would make sense. Or not. The text could just be totally wrong, or we could just be reading it wrong. That's the joy of broadcast text. There's so many more models to see which we couldn't possibly show you all now, like the Runesmith, who looks like he might be the guy that helps you craft your legendary items, or cool vampire people, or a church with arms and legs, because sure, why not? And we'll be including the Wowhead links below so you can get through them in your own time. And before we finish up, a note on Tyrande. We know that she has an important storyline in Ardenweald, and we know that there has been datamined broadcast text involving her this week, but that seems to be connected to a scenario, which looks like it may make up part of the very opening of the expansion, where we rescue her from captivity in the Maw before she even heads to the home of the Night Fae. But we've got our eye on Tyrande, don't you worry. We'll be watching her very closely from here on in.
Oh, and it's here! It's here, Evitel! Shadowlands has landed! And we've landed in the middle of it, and we're going through it, and so many new things. I remember that it was like exactly like this in the BFA alpha when that first
hit.
hit.
Feeling. It kind of feels like Christmas.
Yeah, a little bit. But it's kind of like if someone told you what all your Christmas presents were going to be way before Christmas.
And you got like hints of them.
Yeah.
And you got to see like little pieces of them.
Totally. So like, and so like, if you wanted a bike, and maybe like every now and then you'd just be given like a glimpse of a wheel or a handlebar or a brake and stuff, and you didn't know if they all went together to actually make a bike, or if by the time you got to Christmas and you opened it, maybe one of the wheels and the chain would be missing or something, and there'd be a whole different seat on it and stuff. It's like a really bad metaphor that I just used.
It helps you manage your disappointment.
Exactly, because it's not just the stuff that's in the game, it's the stuff like surrounding the data mining and stuff as well. And I have to say, watching Wowhead's like live data mining stream when that alpha first went live, as they were going into it and they were uncovering all the models, and it was like, oh my god, Mue'zala, open that one, and it was like, oh, the jailer, open that one, and what have you. It was like, it's super exciting and genuinely like the best stream I've ever watched, and I include all of our streams in that.
Wow.
Even the one where we interviewed Steve Danusa.
That's fine.
Yeah, which we did this week. And by the way, thank you, Steve, for being on our stream and on our show. And we had some amazing chats about lore and story and, you know, where that's going to be going in Shadowlands and what's going to be happening. We talked Titans, we talked Arthas, we talked Covenants, we talked Zones, we talked everything that I could think of, and it was brilliant. So the VOD of that is on our Twitch channel. You can go and find that. There's the usual link to that down below. Is there anything that's jumped out at you particularly from all the Shadowlands stuff in the first week?
The lack of good male armor. I'm not even joking.
And of course, by the time this episode is even out, there'll probably be another build. I'm thinking we might get one or maybe
sure
even
there
2
will be.
builds a week on average. Obviously, there'll be weeks where there isn't anything at all.
Yeah.
But if it follows like even slightly the BFA train, and I know that circumstances are very different, then we will be getting regular builds and stuff like that. So
Can't
we'll be
wait.
talking a lot about that on this channel. So what are you hoping to see next?
I'm really excited to see Beyond Bastion. So
Yeah.
like we've kind of been going through Bastion a little bit in the alpha.
Totally, and it is beautiful, and I have enjoyed seeing all different. I've walked around the entire place and seen the corner and stuff. But I agree with you. Like we played that in BlizzCon,
Yeah.
and I want to see some other zones. Now.
Although it is very, very, very pretty.
Yeah,
and like
definitely.
little fields of wheat are amazing.
Oh my god, the fields of
Oh.
wheat, they're incredible.
Love
so,
it.
I know everyone's really excited for Torghast as well,
Yeah.
and something we didn't have in one of these sections actually was that Wowhead have data mined lots of Torghast upgrades. Because it's like a roguelite and stuff like that. So you get upgrades to your Covenant abilities and to your just abilities in general, like incremental ones that you build up over time, and also mental ones that you buy like in a Torghast run
Yeah.
and stuff like that, which
Okay.
are just crazy, like off the scale ones like that. So really looking forward to see how those work out as well, and we'll be taking you along for the ride. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Maybe there's some new stuff out already, and this video is completely out of date. Wouldn't be
Probably.
the first time. If you like this episode, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to make all of our work happen. Guys, without you, there'd be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evitel. Thank you. We're going to put that whole Steve the Newser interview up on Patreon as
We
well.
should do
before
that.
the next Q&A, which should
Let's do
hopefully
it.
be this week.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. And remember, my name is Steven.
Oh.
No, my name is Taliesin from me
And me, Evitel.
and Anirin, who I think wants some attention right now.
Yeah.
In fairness, we haven't fed him for 3 days while we've been recording this.
Just been data mining.
So, I
and
mean,
playing alpha.
who knows where he is? Who knows what he's up to right now? Until next time, cheerio.